Jim, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Chris, it's my pleasure. I hope to have a very good conversation with you.
I'm sure we're going to have a great conversation. Can you give myself and the audience a little bit of background about who you are and what your life's work has been about?
I was a CIA operations officer, also known as a case officer, for 25 years. My job was to recruit foreign spies, to convince people to commit treason, to betray a trust, to become spies for the CIA. I did that for 25 years. I had 12 years overseas, five overseas postings, and I devoted most of my CIA career to battling the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, such as nuclear weapons, biological weapons, chemical weapons. But I recruited a lot of other sources as well, and that was really my specialty, is what we call HUMINT, or human intelligence. And recruiting foreign spies is the backbone of that. I've been retired since 2005, and since then I've taught tradecraft, meaning how to recruit foreign spies to the CIA, to the FBI, to the DIA, to NSA, to the Department of Defense, and other members of the intelligence community. I also give talks in corporate America on insider threat, how people can lose their intellectual property and their research and development privacy because of folks on the inside who are recruited by people like me. And I discuss why people are persuaded to betray a trust. And I've been doing that now since my retirement. And now my latest endeavor is I've written three spy novels. The first one, Living Lies, the second one, In the Twinkling of an Eye, and my third one is called The Traitor's Tale. And they're all about human betrayal and treachery.
And so I think you kind of answer my next question, which would be, why would someone be willing to betray their country or betray their corporation?
There's a whole host of reasons. We have this acronym that we get in training. It's MICE, or MICE. The first letter M for money, the second letter I for ideology, the third letter C for coercion or blackmail,
Mhm.
and the fourth one E for ego. Personally, I don't believe anybody commits treason or commits espionage or does this for money alone. Money is frequently involved, but they seldom do it only for money. Virtually never. It's usually something else. And I discovered in my career that frequently there's not a single reason, but it's a whole mosaic of reasons why people betray a trust, why they commit treason. And I learned this lesson on my first major recruitment. I had gotten a message from CIA headquarters that advised all of the CIA officers in the field that we were about to engage in a set of very, very high stakes, sensitive negotiations with a certain foreign country, and that we, the CIA officers in the field, should be on the lookout for any people from this country who had certain responsibilities, certain access, as we call it, meaning some of their foreign diplomats abroad. And as luck would have it, I had met a man from this particular embassy a few weeks earlier in a ski class, just by accident,
Hmm.
and we'd had a nice conversation. And so I started what we call development, meaning I am going to have frequent contact with this gentleman. I'm going to try and develop a relationship of trust because trust is at the basis of everything we do, which is ironic since I'm getting them to break a trust.
Yeah.
I'm going to convince them to do the opposite, to replace their trust in their government with trust in me. And anyhow, after a few weeks of this development, developing a relationship, I got it in my head that I could persuade this man to commit treason simply based on our friendship, which was not all that long, and on the power of my personality and ability to persuade him to do it. This is very naive, just going into it with this very short set of reasons. But I wrote to headquarters and asked for permission. We call it a provisional operational approval, a POA, so that I could pitch this man to become a spy. Went to dinner with him. I pitched him, And he looked at me and he said, Jim, you and I are friends, but what you're proposing, that's morally wrong. Chris, I've probably pitched maybe 60 people in my career. He's the only person that ever posed a moral objection.
Interesting.
Yeah, they might pose other objections. Like I had one African intelligence officer say, Jim, they'd hang me in my country if I did that. And he's right, they would. Although he surprised me when he followed up that statement by saying, can I have a rain check? And I said, what? He said, yeah. He said, my son, he's 3 years old. I don't need you now. But in 15 years, he'll be university age and I might need you. I wrote that down in a file. And sure enough, 15 years later, he was posted to our country. And Africa Division came and asked me if I thought that he meant what he said. And I said, yeah. And guess what? That rain check was cashed in. But going back to my first recruitment pitch was an abysmal failure because it was very naive, very shallow. I had no vulnerability data on this guy whatsoever. I just thought I could persuade him to do this. Well, he turned me down, and we have a saying at the CIA that it's okay to be turned down, but not turned in.
Yeah.
Meaning, what do I do? What am I going to do if he goes and tells his ambassador, oh, and, oh yeah, I didn't tell you the fact that he's number two in the embassy. He's the ambassador's deputy. But what if he goes and tells the ambassador, Mr. Lawler over at the American embassy, he just propositioned me to commit treason. And his ambassador had a real hot temper and a reputation for being a real loudmouth. And I could just envision this man storming into our ambassador's office and lodging a very, very stiff diplomatic protest, outrageous behavior on the part of young Third Secretary Jim Lawler. And even though I had headquarters approval, yeah, well, I was about 10,000 miles
Yeah.
from home, and I could just see people going into cover your ass position saying, how
He
did Lawler mess this up?
he did what?
I did what? Yeah, even though they gave me permission. Well, he did what? Oh, he must have screwed it up. We never thought he'd screw it up so badly. So I'm having these nightmare feelings that this is going to go really bad. And after about 3 days, I gave him a call just to see if he and I were still friends. And I was relieved when he didn't hang up the phone in my ear. And I said, we had so much fun the other night. I thought maybe we'd go out and have dinner again on Friday. Now, Chris, my only objective was to smooth any turbulent waters, to maybe back out of this, apologize, say that my words were taken out of context, which actually I was pretty damn clear what I wanted. but I was going to try and smooth this out somehow to where he wasn't insulted and going to go tell on me to his ambassador. But I never got that chance. For one thing, as soon as I said, how about if we go out again? He said, Jim, I was thinking the same thing. So I took that as an encouraging sign that, okay, we're still friends. So I go off to this second dinner, which is 1 week after that first one. The only objective, again, being make sure we're still buddies. First words out of his mouth after the waiter dropped the menus off was, Jim, that offer you made me last Friday, is that still good?
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow, is right. And I said, of course it is. We're friends. And he said, well, what you don't know is my wife, a couple of days after that dinner, announced that she wants a divorce. And I cannot go through that divorce and pay her the alimony to which she's entitled and put my two high school age boys in private schools when we go home. Because in my country, if you don't get a private school education, you don't get a good
Yeah.
education. I can't do that unless I accept your offer, even though I know it's morally wrong. Well, we learned something in law school that if the judge rules in your favor, shut up and get out of court quickly. So I didn't argue the fact or anything like that. And so we agreed that he would be a spy for the CIA. At the very next meeting, our first clandestine meeting, he brought me a stack, maybe 5, 6 inches thick, of classified correspondence in classified in his government's classification, top secret. And as he handed it to me, he said, Jim, let me tell you part of the reason I'm doing this. Actually, it's a big reason why I'm doing this. It's because my ambassador steals all the credit for everything I do and everything everybody else in my embassy does. And he marches around this country like a little banty rooster, saying what an important guy he is. And he says, I hate him. And as I hand you this stack of classified material, it's as if I'm kicking that son of a bitch in the face. I took the material from him and I said, you and I are on the same team. Bring me some more and let's kick that son of a bitch again. And he laughed. But I found out that revenge is
Yeah.
absolutely one of the driving motivations for espionage. Otherwise, unless you are a total narcissist or a total sociopath, you don't justify that unless you can justify the fact that you were betrayed first,
Yeah.
that you're not betraying something, they betrayed you first. Well, anyways, he went on, he was a good spy, and then he was going to be posted back to his home country, and we were going to put him through a polygraph test. Now, polygraphs sometimes are incorrectly described as lie detector
Yeah.
tests. They're not. They're stress detectors. That's all they are. And some people, I'm not one of them, but some people say you can correlate stress with fabrication, stress with deception, things like that. I'm not a strong believer in polygraph tests, but a good polygraph operator, in fact, is a good psychologist, and he can try and gauge whether somebody's telling the truth or not. Now, we were going to put this gentleman through a counterintelligence polygraph, a very single, basically three very simple questions, black or white. Like number one, have you told anyone about your secret relationship with CIA? Yes or no? Number two, are you working with any secret intelligence organization other than CIA?
Yeah.
Yes or no? And finally, number three, did anyone direct you to volunteer to Mr. Lawler at that meeting where you came to agreement on your relationship with CIA? Also, again, yes or no. And the polygraph operator is supposed to stick to those questions, not stray off and go on a fishing expedition unless the person being tested gives them license to do so. But as luck would have it, I had a first tour polygraph operator who'd never been overseas. And the first question out of his mouth was, golly gee, I'm just wondering why you are doing this.
Oh, gee.
Oh, gee is right. My heart rate, I'm sure, spiked because I thought he's going to have a moral epiphany and he's going to storm out of here. And I was amazed when he laughed and he said, because I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, gee.
Basically a thrill seeker. He wanted to be a spy. Well, he went on to become a very good spy. And he was able to participate in the negotiations that were so critical to national security. And not only was he able to tell us his country's negotiating positions, he told us all about their fallback positions. And I always analogize by saying, if you went to a car dealer, wouldn't you like to know the lowest dollar
Yeah.
you could offer to buy a car? After which the guy would say, no, I can't do it. Well, that's exactly what this guy did. And it was estimated that he saved the United States government tens of billions of dollars because we knew exactly what their positions were. But to get back to motivations on espionage and things like that, it was a whole mosaic. Yeah, he loved his boys. He was in financial issues because of the alimony thing. He hated his boss. He also told me at one point that he was a very fair-skinned, blue-eyed, blonde guy, but in a country where most of the people were mixed race. And he said that he thought he was a victim of reverse discrimination.
Mm.
Again, he's justifying it. And so that's fine. I'm not going to argue with the guy. Um, but there's usually a whole lot of motivations that go into this, and it's rarely is it just one, and it's never or hardly ever just money. So I was able to hit him at the right time. In fact, over the next several years, I recruited three people going through divorce. And I've learned that divorce is one of the most
Yeah.
psychologically tumultuous times possible in a person's life. It's emotionally, psychologically, and financially stressful. And if you have me in your orbit and you have something I need, I become your best friend. And I'm like your life ring. And I always say, I never once recruited a happy person. I recruited people under stress. And it was a lot like if you or any of your listeners have ever been rock climbers. In order to climb a rock, you look for a crack system.
Mm,
You put your fingers and toes to climb the rock. You can't climb smooth rock, and you can't tell the crack system from a long way off. But people are like that. They have a crack system. And if you get close, you can study the crack system, and then you know exactly how to relieve the stress. And I think that was the secret of my success and a lot of my recruitments was I'm an extremely keen listener. I'm a very curious person, meaning that I'm curious. Before you and I got on the air here, Chris, I was asking where you live, a
yep.
little bit about your background. I wasn't doing that to, I don't know, to anything other than I'm just curious, why you became a podcaster and things like that. Another secret to recruitment or
Can
persuasion
I can
is
I ask you can I ask you one
yes, please go
question?
ahead, Chris. Sure.
Is I wonder this about kind of the revenge motive. Is that some point that potentially a double-edged sword in that if they feel that they've been betrayed by you, now you become the target of their revenge or their rage?
If they ever felt that, yes. And that has happened to some of my colleagues, but I never betrayed any of my assets. In fact, we consider our assets, our spies that we recruit, we consider their security to be our top priority. And I want them to continually know that I am there for them. And I want them to be able to share everything with me, which is why the listening ability, empathy is everything.
Yeah.
To recruit someone, I want to get inside their head and know what makes them tick. Another quality is patience. It took me one time 10 years to recruit one source because in the first 9.5 years, he didn't need me. We were friends. In fact, we were more than friends because I was best man at his wedding. Yeah, I mean, when I'm going after somebody, I'm going after them. But he didn't have any cracks that I could see until he went through a divorce.
Mm,
And the wife, the wedding that I attended as best man, well, she decided she didn't want to live 10,000 miles from home. So she took their new baby child and went home to her home country. So he was devastated by this divorce. And then he returned to his home country. And in the meantime, in the years that he had been gone, his ethnic and racial group, they were no longer in power. And so suddenly he was confronted with a dilemma and he wrote me an email. He said, Jim, I could work 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, and I will never be promoted again. How can I give allegiance to a country that treats its citizens like that?
yeah.
Well, that's like a big sign saying recruit me. So I met him in a European country, dropped cover, meaning I admitted that I was really with the CIA, not with the State Department, which was my cover. And I said, I'd like you to be on my team. And he said, Jim, now I've got something to believe in. And basically, I brought him into my team and over to my side. And he went back to his home country and he was in his foreign ministry when 9/11 happened. And he was there watching on television as our Twin Towers were falling.
Mm,
And he told me later that he became very emotional. He was basically crying. And his colleagues were curious, wondering, why in the world are you so upset? And he said, what they didn't know is I'm on your team now. And so he had, basically transferred his allegiance to us. Uh, but anyways, persuasion, having a persuasive personality, I think helps. I'm a fairly intense person. Uh, in fact, on my last polygraph test, the polygrapher, because we have periodic polygraph tests inside the CIA, typically every few years. Well, the polygraph operator says, Mr. Lawler, there's one word that your colleagues and coworkers all use about you. And I said, what is that? And he said, the word is intense.
mm,
I said, I can use that. I can wear that. That's fine with me. So, being intense, being creative, being a careful observer of stressors in people's lives, all of those are elements of persuasion. But the final mystery element, the one thing that I think gave me an edge, is something that I call the metaphysics. Now, the metaphysics I use that term loosely, but it's like a neural link that if I was going to pitch you, Chris, you and I would go into a different plane of existence. And I would literally like put out like what I envision as an invisible link into your brain to get you to do what I want you to do. And I know that sounds real new agey and things like that, but I swear to God, it works. It does work. And one of my students, who was a deep cover CIA officer, he thought it might be something to do with hypnosis. And he says I was using the same techniques as Dr. Milton Erickson, who developed hypnotherapy back in the 60s and 70s. Maybe so. I know another asset of mine once remarked about my voice, saying that, Jim, she said, Jim, when I'm listening to you, it's like my brain is in a warm waterbed. And so my voice is soothing.
Yeah.
I think, frankly, if I hadn't been a case officer, I would have been good as a therapist, maybe a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And I never am condemning. I never, take people to task for something. I'm very reassuring, and people like that. They look forward to meeting me
Hmm.
and want to do what I want to do. You asked me earlier, before we started recording this program, if there were things people could do to prevent someone like me from having my way
Yeah.
with them. There are a few things. One thing, if something is too good to be true, it's too good to be
Yeah.
true. Come on, let's get, a guy my age or your age, Chris, and we walk into a bar and suddenly a gal who's 20 years younger, who's sexy as hell, comes up to you. Let me tell you, guy, you're not George Clooney. And you didn't suddenly become, a number 10 on the scale. And so something's off. If something's too good to be true, usually it's too good to be true. Um, Now, I think what I did persuading people to become spies for our national security, I think that's right. In fact, I gave a talk similar to this at NSA one time a few years ago. I must have had 500 or 600 people in the audience. And at the end of this, and I tell very graphic stories about how I recruit people. At the end of this, a young man in the back raised his hand and he said, Mr. Lawler, do you consider yourself to be a moral person? And I said, that's an interesting question, and I've thought about that a lot. And in fact, I think that a young Marine Corps sniper, if he takes an Al Qaeda bomb maker into his sights at 1,000 yards, that young Marine Corps sniper is a moral person. And as long as I do this for national security purposes, that I'm a moral person. Where it becomes maybe immoral is how much I enjoy it, though. So, I mean, to
So,
be able to
so, so,
manipulate
so,
people,
so,
I
so,
mean,
so,
I tell people, you want to know what I do? I manipulate, I exploit, I subvert, I suborn people. I manipulate them to do what I want them to do. And I was good at it.
so what makes you kind of like that sense of like, it's a good thing that I wasn't doing this for my own benefit all the time. Like, where do you,
Well, I don't think it's,
where do you draw the line? Or where would you
okay.
draw the line in that sense?
I've used it personally a few times. It's amazing. I've gotten myself out of traffic tickets by just telling the cop that we're just going to forget about this now, aren't we?
This is not the person you want to give it the Jedi mind trick. You are not going
Well,
to write a ticket.
yeah, basically, and they don't. Um, I've got this ability to persuade people to do things they might otherwise not do. And, um, but where would I draw the line? Well, I don't know. I've never used it to say in a romantic relationship because I don't think that's fair. I want the other person to really want it, to want whatever. And I have never used blackmail or extortion. I think that's like driving down the street with a rattlesnake in the back seat because that person will turn on you. Like you said earlier
Yeah.
about somebody would betray you if they are doing this under coercion, they would betray you. So my job was always to keep them pumped up. I had a senior officer once, a colleague said, Jim, you're nothing but a cheerleader. And I said, okay, that's fine. If I can make them feel good about this, and I always rewarded the people that I was working with. I mean, I would build in little bonuses, give them nice gifts. They got good compensation for what they were doing. If they needed something badly, I would try and do whatever I could to get it for them. And I think the most important thing, though, in most of my assets' lives was the fact that I was listening. And they would tell me things that they would not tell their best friend or their spouse because I was safe. I didn't condemn. I was never judgmental. And if they wanted my advice, I'd give it. But I didn't say, well, Chris, you ought to be doing this or something like, no,
You
no.
ought to become a spy.
Right, you ought to know. I'm not.
I,
So
so would you consider your assets friends?
that's a good question. Some of them definitely were. The guy that I took 10 years to recruit, he and I would go running on the weekends, long distance. We were both long distance runners. The difference being that he was world class and I'm not. But yeah, and we're still. In fact, he and I are still in touch, and he signs his emails and stuff to me as your brother. I felt very close to him. There were other people, however, that in ordinary circumstances you would not want to be friends with.
Yeah.
But I have an ability to try and find at least one redeeming quality about anybody. And I mean, even Hitler was good to his dogs. So I don't know. Uh, if you try hard enough, you can find that even the most reprehensible person, most narcissistic person, you can find something about them that is redeeming. And then they reciprocate. They don't have many friends because they're such jerks, but you're becoming their friend and you're listening to them and you're understanding them. And that gives me an edge on people where they're not going to betray me because I may be their only friend.
It's interesting because like everything that you're talking about persuasion is so opposite of what happens in most like scam and fraud type situations. Like the person's abusive, they're mean, they're they're nasty, they're
Mhm.
raising their voice, they're trying to exploit the person, hurry them, and like everything that you did is almost the exact opposite of all that.
I think so. I mean, one basic thing is I'm a strong believer in the golden rule that I treat others as I would want to be treated. And I'm sincere. And they feel that and they know that I'm not a bad person. I'm a good person and that I care about them. So I mean, could I be a con man? No, I couldn't because that would go against my moral principles and conscience. Even though, if you asked me, could I use my powers of persuasion to get some of that? Yeah, I could. But that's not fair. That's not something I would want to do. Um, it's just no. I use whatever powers I have for I think the good.
Mm-hmm. And do you know of any people that were assets that specifically regretted working with you after the fact?
No, no. Some of my well, actually three of my assets were once arrested because they committed espionage.
Yeah.
And they did some other things too. Okay, but we had a commitment. I'd made a commitment to them on behalf of our director for their security, and we got every one of them out. So and it was through no fault of their own. It was just almost inevitable that they were going to get caught at some point, and they did. And then we got them out. This is not always the case, however. I had a very good friend, good CIA officer friend of mine, who once asked me to have lunch with him at the CIA headquarters building and then to walk around the building afterwards. And he told me that one of the Russian spies that Aldrich Ames, the traitor Aldrich Ames, had betrayed, that he was the recruiter. My friend was his recruiter, and this guy was shot.
Mm.
And my friend said he wouldn't have died if I hadn't recruited him. And I said, Francis, you didn't betray him. That was Aldrich Ames. But my friend, he wept. That's how close we get to our assets and how much we value their security. So it's a sacred trust. It's a vow that we take that we're going to do everything possible to keep these people safe. But yeah, it's I mean, during the time that the assets that I'd recruited were in prison, I lost a lot of sleep, and finally we got them out, though. Thank God.
Did any of your assets try to recruit you? because I figure if you're recruited, uh, if you're making an overture of, hey, I want to recruit you, if they were, technically a counterpart to you as opposed to
Mhm.
a government official, could it be a little bit of like, oh, okay, let me see if I can flip the guy that's trying to flip me?
Not really, but sometimes they did influence me. And well, okay, I'll tell you. I mean, I was handling. I had not recruited, but I was the handling officer for a senior Arab ambassador, and he was a member of a group that is very much opposed to the United States. But we had recruited him, and I was handling him. And he did tell me a lot about his people and his country. And I had kind of opened my eyes. I think I was a little more sympathetic to his people and why they did what they did
Mm-hmm.
because of that. Now, he wasn't really recruiting me, except maybe in a philosophical sense. And but it did open my eyes that, these people, they aren't doing this just for no good
Yeah.
reason. It was illuminating to me to see that. So, but no, I never had anybody pitch me or even try to recruit me. Although sometimes I thought, well, why didn't they do that? What am I, chopped liver? I don't know why they never did. Actually, we had a policy at the agency that if you were pitched, you were to tell the intelligence officer who pitched you that not only is it no, but it's hell no, and you're going to report the pitch. And in fact, in a few cases, we actually authorized the officer, if let's say it was a Russian who offered me $1 million, you'd come back and say, "How about if you work for us for 2 million?" Basically, we double the offer. So, and that would basically stop the other side from doing this because some of their people might actually go for it.
Okay, so so of the people that you pitched, did most of them end up becoming an asset, or did most of
I'd
it,
say
or was there a portion that didn't?
well over 90%. And especially as I got better at it, this is a skill like anything else in life is if you really are focusing, you become better at it. And I'd say I was in for 25 years, and I'd say in the last 15 years, my batting average was close to 100%. Um, and somebody once asked me, did I ever pitch somebody that I thought would say no? And I thought, well, why would I do that? Because you've got little test things that you're putting out there and hypotheticals and even to describe the recruitment meeting as a single meeting is really a fallacy because it's a series of meetings. And finally you get that person to do what you want them to do. And that's the culmination. But you've been building on that for a number of weeks, months, whatever. Now we have another thing called a cold pitch. A cold pitch is where I have never met you, but I know you have access to secret information that we need. And there are certain techniques in a cold pitch where you can maximize your chances of success. And your objective is not so much a recruitment, it's to get the second meeting, get that next meeting, and also hopefully not to have them report it to their security people.
Yeah,
So, and you might say, well, why would they not report it? Well, there's a lot of reasons why somebody might not report the pitch to their security people. Number one, they might be thinking about it.
yeah.
Number two, if they report it to their security people might look at them and say, "No, Chris, why is it that they picked you? What does the CIA know about you? What skeletons are in your closet?"
You're
And
now a liability.
you may not want to have your fingernails pulled out answering those questions. So, the point was to try and get that next meeting and then you work on the person. But yes, I have done cold pitches and recruited on the first meeting.
Yeah, I would assume. Are the cold pitches more monetarily motivated? Because if you don't really have the time to figure out where their cracks
Well,
are, and if there's any
okay.
logical,
The most successful cold pitches is I call them cold, but they're actually a little bit lukewarm. Let's say we were going to cold pitch you, Chris, but you'd never met me, but we have some people in touch with you, or we're following you on social media, and we notice that maybe you're going through a divorce, or maybe you go to the casino a lot, and maybe you're in trouble because you go to the casino a lot. Or maybe you've had some drinking or drug problems, or maybe you've got elder care issues, maybe you've got children that have special needs. And if I know all that stuff and I can couch that pitch to where I know exactly what you need, then you are going to be more receptive. You're going to listen to me.
So cold in the sense that you may not have had a conversation with the
And
person,
you've never
but
seen me before. Cold.
but not cold in the
Yeah.
sense that you don't know a whole heck of a lot about that person.
The less you know, the less chance it'll work.
Yeah.
The more you know, the better the chance it'll work. Because frequently we'll have a deep cover officer who can't risk pitching a target, but they have observed the person. They may know about the person. They may know that the person is going through all kinds of personal turmoil. And they tell me about that. And then, even though that person has never met me, I go in there with basically a peek at their cards. I know, I know how to appeal to them. And I may know that some things turn them off, and I won't do that, but some things that they find, persuasive.
Gotcha. So, how much of your experience has gone in? I'm assuming that your books are fiction, or are they nonfiction?
No, they're fiction. They're all three of them are spy novels, espionage novels.
So, how much of the books come out of not necessarily things that you did that that are not necessarily based on real world situations, but based on the experiences as a whole, if that makes sense.
Frankly, I'd say it's both. My first book, there are a number of parts of my first book, Living Lies, that I mean, there's operations that I did and I've thinly disguised them. My latest book, The Traitor's Tale, again, some of that thinly disguised. But, I base a lot of my stories on things either I've done or things that my colleagues have done. And so it becomes easier for me to write about them. Some of my characters are actually based on some of my friends with their permission,
Mhm.
and it's easier if you're a portrait artist, for example, there's a reason why somebody has a model sit there so that they
Yeah.
can paint them or draw them. And it's much easier to do that than to just paint somebody just out of sheer imagination. So I have some colleagues that I admire and respect a lot, and so I've figured them into all of my books. Actually, there's one woman, Paula Doyle, who in my books she's Paula Davenport. She becomes the deputy director of CIA. Another good friend, Scott Stewart, he was a counterintelligence officer, and he's in all three of my books as Brian Bannock. And then I've got a few other characters and especially in my new book, based on real people I know. I know a very, very distinguished and colorful Texas attorney who I based a character on in my latest book, and he is an amazing person. And in fact, I didn't have to make him up at all. If anything, in real life, he's even more colorful than my character in his book. But he loves the fact that I've got him in the book, and I love him. He's a wonderful man.
That's cool. And so it just kind of like one of the follow questions, just because I'm a nosy person sometimes.
No, you're
Have
just curious. You're just curious.
has your background in your work helped you in your interpersonal relationships?
I don't know. My wife probably should answer that question.
I mean, because like I would like
Yeah.
if it's part of your job to always be listening and to be
Mhm.
always be kind of pulling threads, so to speak. I assume that that technique also happens in your interpersonal relationships where you're just naturally, like you talked about, being naturally creative and just have a character of trying to be endearing to people.
Well, I hope so. I think I'm a thoughtful and loving husband and thoughtful and loving father. Our three children, we had a policy in which, and I used to tell them, the foundation of any human relationship is trust, as the same as in espionage. And we had a policy that whatever they did, I would forgive it as long as they told me the truth. And a couple of times they would say to me, "Dad, is the policy still in effect?"
You're like,
And I'd say,
uh-oh, what'd you do?
yeah, right, right. But I'd restrain myself because if they tell me that they did something, no matter how bad it was, I had to forgive them. But just you had to be honest and tell me the truth. And that's the same relationship that I had tried to have with my covert assets. That we had to trust each other, and they have to tell me the truth, and not only intelligence reporting, but also counterintelligence problems and issues they may have.
Yeah, so it very much sounds like you're the same person. Either you're the same person while working and not while working.
Well, kind
You
of,
you may
except
have different goals. You're not trying to, you
right.
know, dupe your friends into to espionage against the companies they work
No,
for or
no,
anything like
no,
that. But
no, no, no. As I said, most of the time I'm doing this for national security
yeah,
purposes. I'm not doing it to persuade you to buy something or to, I don't know, anything like that. In fact, I just think it's kind of unfair because if I tried, I could do it. I just don't want to do it. I told somebody when I used to work against intelligence officers, it was more like a fair game of tennis. But if I go against a person who's not a trained intelligence officer, that's really, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. I don't get any jollies out of that.
yeah, that's because you have integrity and morals.
Well, thank you. I think I do. Yeah.
At least, hopefully, you do.
Right.
It sounds very much from your experiences that is who you are. So I super appreciate your time today. Again, where can people find? What are your three books, and where can they find them?
So the latest book is The Traitor's Tale, and it is on Amazon. The other two books, Living Lies is the first book, In the Twinkling of an Eye is the second book, and finally The Traitor's Tale. You can read them out of order. They're not strictly sequels, but it might make a little more sense if you started with Living Lies and then went to In the Twinkling of an Eye and then The Traitor's Tale, but you can read them out of order. So, and then if you do get it from Amazon, any author always appreciates reviews. Just a
Yeah,
brief review would be appreciated. And then I have an author's website. It's called the Guild Library at info.com. And so anybody who wants to go online to my author website. It's got more bio about me and about my books and the various podcasts, such as this one.
awesome. We'll make sure to link to all of those in the show notes. And I super appreciate your time coming on the podcast today.
Chris, you're an amazing host. Thank you so much. And I am not trying to manipulate you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay.